It's my pleasure to welcome you to this evening's Freddie Schifflevin lecture event, a gallery talk with the artist ILONA ROYCE SMITHKIN, in conjunction with her exhibition, Keepers of the Flame, Portraits of Provincetown Luminaries. And if you haven't seen it yet, it's only up until August 16th, so you've probably seen it, but you can come and see it again. It's right behind me. We hope you'll join us for the next Freddie Schifflevin event, a lecture on August 25th at 7 p.m. with the artist Paul Resica and art historian Jennifer Samet. The lecture, entitled The Artist as Collector, will be presented in conjunction with Resica's exhibition at PAAM, and we're sitting in it right now. It's this gallery and the one behind us. It's, as you can see, an amazing show. This lecture series was begun in 2003 in honor of the artist Freddie Schifflevin, who was a member of Provincetown's arts community until her passing in 2002. PAAM gratefully acknowledges John and Tony Levin, who make this program possible with their generous support. We'd also like to thank Angel Foods. I don't know if you noticed the fantastic cheese platter in the next gallery, but please help yourself to wine and cheese and visit Angel Foods located directly across the street. So now I'd like to introduce ILONA and talk about tonight's event, and also how I've come to know ILONA. My first experiences of ILONA were over 25 years ago. I'd see her at gallery openings and her fabulous outfits and fantastic eyelashes, and I'd think, who is that red-headed pixie? I heard rumors that her eyelashes were made from Russian sable brushes. I still don't know if that's true, and that she descended from European royalty. Over the past decade, through working here at PAAM, I, like many of you, have come to know ILONA as a gifted artist and teacher, a chanteuse, a style icon, and a wise and generous soul. It has been a blessing and a gift to know her. For those of you who don't know ILONA, which of course is going to change very quickly, I'll provide the official biography below. ILONA ROYCE SMITHKIN was born in Poland and studied at the Reimann Schule in Berlin and Académie Royale des Beaux-Arts in Antwerp. She emigrated to the United States in the 1930s and studied with Robert Brackman at New York City's Art Students League. An impressionistic painter noted for her life studies and portraits, she's captured many of the 20th century's cultural figures, including Ayn Rand, Tennessee Williams, and the singer Bobby Short. Her landmark television series, ILONA's Palette, established the instructional painting genre on PBS and was followed by Painting with ILONA, which generated a companion book of the same title. And ILONA wants you to know that she's bringing more of her books tomorrow because we've run out of them again. I guess it's been a bestseller at PAAM this summer. And then there was also another series called Finishing Touches with ILONA. ILONA maintains a second studio in Provincetown where she continues to exhibit there at PAAM. Her eyelash cabaret, which she performs with her frequent collaborator Zoe Lewis, has become a fixture here at PAAM each summer. She has taught in Kentucky, Indiana, and South Carolina, and of course here at PAAM, and has received awards from private foundations and state arts commissions. She has also been presented with keys to numerous cities. At 95, ILONA is experiencing a renaissance. She's the subject of Melissa Hamill's award-winning documentary, ILONA Upstairs, and a recent book, ILONA ROYCE SMITHKIN, The 60s New York and Provincetown, by John Lucas. She's also been featured in New York Magazine, Time Out New York, Time Out London, The Huffington Post, The New York Post, StyleLikeYou.com, and YouBeauty.com. And I'm sure many other places as well. Please help me welcome ILONA.
Greetings to all of you. I'm delighted to see you, my old friends, my new friends. In this terrible weather to come out is truly a compliment. Thank you. You know, everything in my life has been a surprise. Not that it isn't for you, but all the great events which happened. For instance, when I started in South Carolina to teach, I had a small class, like 7 or 9 people. And the women who were there and the men who were there said, it's the middle of the class, you know, it's a shame. You give so much knowledge that only a few of us get it instead of a lot of people, because there's a lot of things people would enjoy. So one woman said, oh, you know, somebody moved in next door and he's in television. Maybe I should talk to him. I thought, people say a lot of things. That same evening, I got a telephone call, put on your Sunday best, tomorrow he comes to observe. And this is how my first TV show, which was 41.5 hours, started, How to Paint, Ilona's palette. And I was very ambitious to do one thing. I wanted to explain painting in such a simple form. Many people have written books and they're teaching very complicated. I'm a simple soul. For me, it was always very hard to learn. Besides that, I had a terrible inferiority complex. But I wanted to give it to people who had the same problem I had. And even the book which I wrote is written in very, very simple words. So that was my ambition, and that's what I did in the show. And the other thing was, about 4 years ago, everything is sort of strangely, completely unexpected. I walked across the street in order to have a bite to eat. And a young man comes over and he said, may I have your photo taken? I said, sure, what do you need it for? He said, I like to photograph women over 75 who still have a spirit and also who dress colorful. I said, here I am. That is how it started. So he had the book, Advanced Style, and that's the book. About 4 years later, that's this year, he came out with a film with the same name. Has anybody seen that, Advanced Style? It is a story about 6 different women. They're all younger than me. I mean, they're 75, they're 80, 85. I'm the oldest broad. However, it's an interesting thing because each woman is capable and does things and is so completely different. I want to talk to you about what you would like to hear. So could I have some hands up what you would be interested in so that I can really give you what you want? Anybody? Okay, if you're, okay. Speak slow. Speak slow.
Of yours.
Pardon?
I think I had classes with you for maybe 10 years before I was encouraged to go back to art school, and go to art school from you. However, everything I learned in art school doesn't compare to a lot of the fundamental advice that you gave me as a teacher. For instance, when applying ochre, the color ochre.
I'm so glad.
It's the grandmother color, always a safety net that you can be sure it'll stand by you in the painting. And there were all of these little tidbits that you gave, not unlike the philosophy behind the simplistic, fundamental techniques that you've laid out in your book, which I also taught.
Well, it gives me great pleasure if I could come through.
Yeah. So, I think it's really interesting, some of that advice, and you give it all the time throughout a class. If maybe you could share some of those things with this audience, especially some of the audience painters, and just interesting stuff, the metaphoric.
But thank you very much.
Yeah.
This show, which you have seen or will see, which is right here, came completely unexpected. because at this stage of my life, I'm completely unambitious. I've seen a lot, I've done a lot, I had sad things, I had happy things. Right now, I'm just happy to be alive. So to me, things like the glory and success and things like that mean very, very little. My success and my real joy in living is to be happy, make happy, and not have any worries, which is very hard. However, the show came about because Carolyn Fischel and Angela Russo got together and they said, we'll have a show of the faces you did. I said, I don't want to have anything to do with it. I haven't got the strength. They said, you don't have to do anything. We do it all. I said, really? They said, yes. I said, okay. If I don't have to worry about it, you do it. So my deep thanks to you, because it really looks beautiful beyond anything I would have imagined. Thank you. Yes.
First, I want to say hello.
Hello. I was delighted you made it. Rain and storm didn't stop you. Okay, so go ahead.
I missed the beat there. I'm sorry.
You what?
I missed that.
Go ahead, ask your question.
Pardon?
Ask your question.
Yeah, ask you a question, but speak slowly. You know, when you get my age, there are a number of things which are wonderful. There are a number of things which aren't so wonderful. One of them is your hearing is a little bit worse. You're seeing, well, I can't complain. I still can read like that and make my portraits. But you walk very carefully and slowly because you don't want to fall. And a lot of little things, but go ahead with your question.
I'd like to ask you, did you have any experiences in your childhood of artwork that you were attracted to?
Would you interpret, please?
When you were young,
Yeah.
was there any artwork that you were particularly drawn to, attracted to?
I like beautiful things. If there were shoes, if there were stones, if there were jewelry, if there were painting, something which would attract me. But anything, I was very broad about it. I could see a tree which was very beautiful in the street, a bush, you know, a doggy who might look very interesting, or pussycat. It didn't matter. I was always attracted to things which were interesting and pretty. But I was brought up without the things people are brought up now. I didn't have anything artificial. I had to I made my own toys. I didn't have ever a doll. I took sometimes weeds in the street and I played grocery. This one was radish and this one was so-and-so. So I made my own world, really. So I lived really in a great deal of a fantasy world when I was very young. However, to come back to the show, since this is supposed to be gallery talk, when I painted these people, whom you see there, each one had a very, very different aura and a different feeling. And the wonderful thing is that I kept it in my mind and I put it right there, what I felt when I painted them. For instance, Tennessee Williams didn't want to be, he said, I never want to hold still. I said, who's asking you? Do what you want, I'll catch you while I can. So I was sitting with my sketch pad and he was talking to a friend of mine and he took out poetry which he had never published and he read it. And it was just wonderful to listen to that. I remember one poem. It was the stonemaker's angels were 7. They were serene and their heads reached to heaven. And apparently the stonemaker wanted to change something, sculpt something, so he was on the ladder. And I don't remember the rest of the poem, but this is historic. And he, just as he fixed it, he slipped and he fell and he called, help me, to the 7 angels. Nobody helped because they were out of stone and he died. That was his poem which he read while I was drawing him. Heaton was home. Some of you, you are all very, very young, but some of you who lived in Provincetown might have seen and met Heaton Boss. Anybody knew him? Okay. It took me 2 years to ask him to really, that he posed for me. He finally said, how much time? Oh, roughly an hour. He said, okay. We made a date. He said, I did him. He said, is it over? I said, yes. He said, good. He got up, went out. He didn't even take one look. He wasn't the least bit interested. Ruth St. Denis, whom I painted many, many years ago, when I came to the Hotel Algonquin, where she was in New York, we had an appointment. There was this gracious, lovely lady. She was already about 69 at the time. She had a red velvet cape with a golden frock, you know, the things which you unbutton. And she said, oh, you are the little artist, because I'm little, I said, yes. She said, well, how are you going to paint me? Like this? Or, she unbuttons that, splinter naked. I said, but I think, Miss Dennis, we don't have time for all of you. Then she posed. And we talked very little, and she said, my dear, will you excuse me a moment? I said, of course. She had 2 rooms in the hotel. So she vanished there, the door was a little ajar. I waited 5 minutes, I waited 10 minutes, nothing. So I looked a little in that crack, she was stretched out on the bed, deep asleep. So I said, well, she needs her slumber. I waited some more. 5 minutes later, she comes out. How was I? She posed exactly the way she said. Then she felt a little bit more at ease with me, and she started to tell me all kinds of stories. She told me the story that she and her group were invited to Japan to perform for the emperor. They arrived there, a Rolls Royce was waiting for them, brought them to the hotel, and the room next to them was laid out with beautiful Japanese costumes. She said, look, we have our own costumes, we don't need that. They didn't want to hear of it. A little bit later, they found out that there were 20, the same number of dancers, there were 20 geisha girls expected, and they thought the dancers were the geishas. Anyhow, so she said, now I'm going, after it was over, and she liked it very much, she said, come, my dear, I'll take you to lunch. I take you to a wonderful place. You will hear all the languages, and it is so interesting. And I thought, 45th Street, I've been here so many times. What kind of place can she have? Well, it started to rain, and she had little silver sandals. And I said, Miss Dennis, aren't you afraid it's a little raining? She said, my dear, rain is good for your toes. So we walked about 2-3 houses, and lo and behold, there was a cafeteria. We went to a cafeteria, and she was absolutely right. You could hear all the languages. It was certainly interesting. But this was my adventure with Ruth St. Denis. If you remember Jacob's Pillow, she was a person there. Anyhow, that was another one. There are lots and lots of stories, but in general, you would see most of the things which I wrote underneath gives you a feeling of the person, because I wrote down what I felt at that particular time when I painted them. If anybody has any questions, please interrupt me or tell me. Questions?
Donna was asking if you could give any advice to budding artists.
Yeah. If they're budding or hoping to bud. You have to have a bread and butter job. You can't rely on selling paintings or selling your voice if you're an opera singer. You have to have something which gives you a roof over your head and food to eat. This is the most important thing, no matter how good you are, because it's not how good you are. If you cannot eat, you look horrible. And you have to be well, and that's very important. That's my best advice for anybody who goes in the arts.
That was your dad's advice to you.
Pardon?
That was your father's advice to you.
Oh, my father never wanted me to become an artist. He said, I don't want any of these crazy bohemians in my family. And my mother fought for it and fought for it. Finally, he said, okay, only if she learns something practical, then she can also take art. So I learned millinery. So when I came to the country, 1938, I could certainly not get a job as an artist, and the ideology was different, people thought different, dressed different. I became a milliner for a while. Then I designed things, and then I had leather novelties, little doggies cut out, little pussy cat, and my fingers looked like a map because the needle always went in the wrong place. Then I did doll's faces on buttons, and my eyes started to jump like that because there were 100 buttons on a little plate. And 2 eyes, 2 eyes, 2 eyes. You know, remember Charlie Chaplin when he was in the factory and he came with the thing and there was a lady with 2 buttons in it. Okay. Does it answer? Yeah, okay. Now, when you see these things, I'm going to be around, and if you have any questions then, I will be delighted to answer you. And in my life, everything was such a surprise, such a revelation, such an unexpected thing. I never thought of age, for instance. For me, 1 year passed, it was a number, but it didn't have any meaning. I never particularly celebrated my age. And I was so surprised when the number became 90. Yeah. Where did it go to? However, in retrospect, when I look back, I taught for 40 years in Kentucky, South Carolina, Idaho, Arizona, you name it. And I went 1 week to one community, then they picked me up to the next community. So I learned a lot about this country. And I had a wonderful time. I traveled spring and fall. And I learned so much about people because every little community is completely different. Then also in the beginning, when I went first, I went to Paducah, Pikeville, Owensboro, Lancaster, Lexington, Kentucky, Louisville, Kentucky. When I went to the small towns, they were very reluctant. They were very, we don't want somebody from outer space, from outside. They were very much concentrated on the community. But I made boo-boos. I was funny. I didn't make any demands. I didn't ask any extra sausage. And they thought, gee, that's not so bad, you know? And so I paved the road for musicians and other entertainers, and it gave me great pleasure, because after that they feel more confident about the people, and that it's really not quite that bad to have an outer person. So that was quite an experience. Yes?
Can you tell us about fashion? What is your fashion style?
You know, the funny thing is, since the photography was taken, I'm part of the fashion world, the cosmetic world, the smelly world, I mean the perfumes, pardon me. And I am, this always was part of me when I made combinations of colors, when I was dressing, even when I didn't even know the word fashion, what did it mean. When I was younger, we didn't have time for fashion. We had to make a living. We had to make money to eat. You see, who thought about all this fancy stuff? You know, however, I always felt color marries or falls in love with another color. And then you introduce maybe another one. And then maybe a little dash of something else, just to make it a little bit more sweet and sour, you know? It's like food. Only you don't get fat. But when you speak about fashion, what did you mean in particular?
Well, you have a particular style, and I know from watching advanced style, yours is, I think, much more creative than some of the others. You make your own jewelry, you put things together. Can you talk a little bit about how you do that?
Well, many times I couldn't afford anything. so what I did was necessity. I took a pair of short pants and I thought it's beautiful material. I don't want to give it away. What am I going to do? And, I cut out the crutch and I made a blouse out of it. I still have it. It's 47 years old. So you see, you make do. It forces you into more inventiveness. My shoes, for instance, I needed something to go. It was raining outside, so I had another shoe on, and I thought it has to be a little feisty. So I took a silver pen and quickly made a design on it. However, every one of you has a capacity and a good mind. If you really wanted to, you would have a lot of fun doing some of the things. Sometimes I have a spot, and it doesn't come out, and it doesn't come out. You know what I do? I take my brush, and I make a little daisy on it, or a little flower, or whatever. So who knows it's a spot? It's a design. So you see, that is, fashion to me is look good, look attractive, find out what's best for you. If the fashion is, which I hate, that your boobs are, you know, they have a seam here. For the girls who have hardly anything, it's marvelous. But for the girls who have something, it looks like, what do you call a woman who, when a woman cannot give milk to the baby, what do you call it? In German it's Hebamme. Wet nurse. You look like a wet nurse. Well, anyhow, yes.
Can you tell us about Provincetown?
Can I what?
Tell us about Provincetown, either your experience here or why you're
Oh, sure. About 1947 was the very first time I came to Provincetown. I never had heard about it before, but it was a time when I snapped out of a gray period in my life. Everything was gray. Nothing gave me really joy. It was a period. And I went to a traveling agency and I said, I would very much like to go to a place which isn't too big, but which has nice nature, where I could meet somebody possibly. And if I don't meet somebody, that it's so nice I can bicycle or walk around and enjoy it. I said, I've just the place for it, Provincetown. I came here by railroad. They had a railroad which stopped at the pier in Bradford. It's gone long. Oh, I came out of it and I had saved enough money, $3 a night I saved for 1 week. And I came out, there was a taxi cab, and I went to the guy and I said, I'd like you to help me out because I need a place to stay and I only have $3 a night. She said, oh, that's fine. My grandpa, he took me to the cab around the corner. It was Jason, my barber. Those of you who have been here a long time, the corner where the Cobalt Gallery is now. So there were about 6 rooms and 1 bathroom, and I stayed there overnight, and they were very, very nice, but I walked around and I said, I want to be near the sea. This is why I came. I don't want to be inside. So I found a place which is still the Anker Inn. And there was an old lady who owned the house. And I came there and I said, you know, have you got a little room? It doesn't matter how small. I have only $3 a night. She said, come, my dear. Come up one flight, tiny little room, a small bed, that was all, one window. It was very nice, it was quiet, but no sea because it was towards the street. So next morning, with tears in my eyes, because I liked her very much, she was very sweet, I said, I like you and I like your house, but you know, I would love to hear seagulls, and I would very much like to see the sea, how it comes and how it goes. But I only can afford $3, and you know, I'm an artist. She said, you are an artist? Do you mind walking 2 flights down to the bathroom? I said, not at all. When you're young, you don't care. Anyhow, she said, come, I will give you the honeymoon suite. I said, but you don't, I only have $3. She said, you are an artist. I'd rather have you stay there. And she gave me a place, the top floor, and I really was woken up by seagulls fighting about a fish. I really saw how they came in and out and in and out, and it was wonderful. And then, instead of painting, you know, I started to write. I was so thrilled that all the love and all the joy I had to come out some way, and it came out on paper. And I also rented a bicycle, and I took a tiny little jar where I put water, and I went into the dune. At that time, it was perfectly all right. You left your bicycle right on the street, you walked up to the dunes, and you start to paint, and it was wonderful. And you know, the other day, I looked for a brush, and I came across drawings of watercolors, which I did in 1947.
Wow.
Yeah, amazing. I was so pleased I saw it. I said, hey, you weren't bad at all then. Yeah.
We're in the East End Gallery District now, but there didn't used to be.
Oh, no.
You were the first gallery to open in the East End, what's now the Carillon Gallery. But tell us about that.
All right. Where you see the Lucas Gallery, right next to it, there's steps going down. At the time, there was a restaurant called the Buttery. And that was Richard Lisher, whom you saw, one of the paintings is, he was a very undertaking man. He was an architect. He loved to discover things and had wonderful ideas. But in the middle, when it started, he left it. He lost interest. There are lots of people who have that excitement in the beginning, and then they lose interest. But anyhow, he had some wonderful things. Years later, he opened a restaurant called the Groaning Board, that was on top in front, where the other gallery is. We had that gallery about 14 years, and we had a lot of very interesting things happening. We had Henry Henry there, and there were lots of stories about that. But anyhow, we had, you know, we had to deal with artists who were very angry if we didn't accept the work. And we tried to tell them it's not that it's not nice, but we don't deal with modern things. We only deal with impressionism or recognizable things. But they felt very personally hurt. So it was very difficult to say no to people, you know. And you learned how to deal with it, which was a lesson.
But the actual opening of that gallery.
We didn't. We had a certain time limit, and we were opening on Friday. And it was not finished because the workers didn't show, only boards were there. And Karen had the idea, why don't we go to the dunes and get the white sand and put white sand on it? Which we did. And believe me, those pails are heavy. Sand is heavy. So anyhow, we put sand there, and then we had a Persian rack. What is it called, Persian? A runner, which we put in the middle, and a Spanish bench, wrought iron black bench with a red velvet pillow. That was the whole gallery. That was the opening. And then when we had a Eugene O'Neill play, I drew all the actors in that play. I did sanguine sketches like in there, and we had a show of all the actors of Eugene O'Neill. It was a very interesting show. When we had Henry Hanshy, when we represented him, the first room, there were like 2 sections. The first room, we had 7 different paintings of the same subject. A dish, what do you call it when you wash yourself at all times? A basin. And a bottle of wine, something like that. And it showed how he started first, the middle, the next step, 7 different things till the finished painting, so people could see how he went about it. And in the next room we had finished paintings, all kinds of different paintings. And one day, every Friday or Saturday, whenever we came there for a demonstration, Henry Hanshy would give a demonstration, and he would sell it for about $100. And then he would take it home. When he came back, he had changed it so much you didn't recognize it. So when we found out, we told him, no, we take it home right away, because we were so afraid he would take it. One day he gave a demonstration in his chicken coop, which was sort of a little closed-up area. And he was painting and painting. And the last stroke he made, you heard, the chicken laid an egg. I don't make that up. It really was, we laughed our head off. So anyhow, our gallery was the only gallery in this side of town. Nobody else had a gallery. I don't know why exactly, but it was not the preferred part of town. Yes? You look as if you want to say something. No? Okay, you just look like it. But it was quite an interesting time. Any questions?
Hello.
Yeah.
The colors in that particular, in those paintings on the wall, match your hair and match what you're wearing.
What is that?
The sanguine crayon matches your hair and your outfit.
I'm so glad it pleases you.
Is this your favorite color, though?
I must tell you one thing. People have given me a lot of interviews, and everybody wants to know, what is your favorite costume? What is your favorite person? What is your favorite time of year? In all of these things, I have to give the same answer. Every place where I am at the moment is fine. I'm no more having great hopes because I don't even know if I make tomorrow. And that's not said sadly. If I've had it, I had it. But, I mean, I love it here, but if it goes, it goes, you know. That reminds me of a story. I have to tell you a little funny story. When I was in South Carolina, somebody told me this story. There was a guy who was 95 years like me, and he went to the doctor for a checkup because he found a young woman he was going to marry. The doctor looked him over and he said, you know, John, they knew each other years and years, so they know each other. You know, John, you're in perfect health. He said, thank you, doctor, thank you. He said, before you go, I just would like to advise you, when you're on your honeymoon, just take it a little easy. He said, Doc, I've been thinking about it. I figure if she dies, she dies. You know, when I had taught a class, and sometimes people become very heavy and sad, it doesn't come out right, it doesn't come out right. What I used to do is tell them little stories like that, and it cheered everybody up. And it was a great interruption to take your sad part, turn it into, hello, Dolly, you know. So that was great. Yeah.
You recently told me you had learned 5 things that were basic to having a good life. Would you share them with us?
Would you all like to know? Okay. The first one, I figured, is comfort. If you're not dressed comfortable, like women used to have a corset that could hardly breathe, how can that be charming when they think this hurts, you know? Now, so comfort also with people. When you're with a person you don't feel comfortable with, then it's very icky. So comfort is a very, very important thing. The second thing would be harmony. Harmony encompasses music, dance, art, and everything, and balance. That is very important. These are the beautiful things of life which are extracurriculum. After that, I think comes compromise. When you deal with other people, you have to learn you can't always have your own way. And the other person has demands, and some are more demanding than others. And some are control freaks. And you have to deal with that. There's always such a thing as giving in. You don't have to give in the whole thing, but make an attempt. And if the statesmen would do such a thing, we would have a much easier world, I think. So that is compromise. The next one is contentment. Most of my younger life, I never gave me credit myself what I did, what I accomplished. Nothing was ever good enough. And I always thought, I have to do this, I have to do this drive, which all of us at one time or other have. If you can let go of that and take a look what you have done, even if you make just a good cup of coffee, you have accomplished something, a little something which is nice. Be proud of yourself. Be happy about it. Give yourself credit. And the last thing is awareness. I remember many years ago, there was in the Universalist church, there was a preacher or a reverend who came. He only appeared once because the person in charge couldn't come, and he was a lovely older fellow. And he came in and he said, I have to tell you a story. I'm going to talk to you about awareness. I stepped out of my house because I looked very much forward. I live in Truro, and I looked very much forward to come to Provincetown and to lecture. As I stepped out, and I already smiled about it, and I was just about to take the next step, a car came very fast around the corner. If I would have taken that extra step, I would not have been able to be here with you. It left such a deep impression that we have to be aware. When you walk in the street, you think of 10 different things. Suddenly a bike comes and pushes you over. Something can happen. We have to be aware about the moment of what we are doing at the moment. It makes sense, doesn't it? These are the 5 things I found are very essential for living. I'm surprised you remember.
Where does love come in? Under compromise.
She said, where does love come in?
You what?
Where does love come in?
Love is all around us. When you get up in the morning, at least for me, I get out of bed, I can still walk. Slowly, but I can still walk. Number 2, my first thing is I run to the window, look at the bay. I look at the beauty of all this, and if you don't call that loving, I don't know what is. Then I come back, then I take my bath. Great, wonderful. I seduce myself each morning when I get up because I really don't want to get out of bed sometimes. So I say, oh, you have to cream yourself, you anoint yourself. So I'm doing that. That's the next. My cup of coffee. Not that I'm crazy about coffee, but the idea of coffee, and it's so comforting, like the English would have tea maybe. It gives you warmth, it gives you comfort. You don't have to do very much about it, and It is a wonderful thing, and I seduce myself in everything. I make myself look forward to things which are nice, and that is part of love. People for me have become very, very loving creatures because everybody I know and see has something wonderful, something beautiful, something enjoyable. Sometimes you have to look a little bit more for it than others. But they've got it, they've got it. And I feel like a treasure hunter. And I get a treasure out of everyone, and it makes me happy, and you know it makes the other person happy, because in discovering their nicety, I let them know about it. I don't keep it deep inside, you know. And they are happy because they discover themselves too. So that's the mutual thing you can't lose. Yes, anybody? Well, anyhow, I want you to know that if you have a chance to get older, get older and try to enjoy everything and leave the negative things aside. I know they happen to me, they happen to everybody. But don't make them big, make them smaller. Don't let them get inside of you, you know. And don't be bothered by things which are minimal. Don't let tiny little things get under your skin. I remember when we are young, every little thing seems to annoy us when it's not done our way. When you get older, you say, so what? What the difference does it make? Tomorrow you don't even remember what bothers you. So, you know, we came from art, we came into memory, and we came into, speaking of memory, you know, from the waist up, I'm very blessed because I feel wonderful. From the waist down, don't ask, don't tell. But I would like to tell you the story about memory because it was such a sweet story. And I told it once in my Irish cabaret, and those of you who have heard it, bear with me, because those people, the other people will enjoy. There was a couple who was getting older and older, and each year they went to their yearly checkup. And the doctor said to them after the checkup, you know, you're very lucky, you're in very good health, you can go home and you don't have anything to worry about. And the husband hesitated and he said, you know, Doc, we have a little problem. We are becoming very forgetful. Is there any pill or anything we can have? And he said, unfortunately, nothing has been invented yet. He said, is anything which we can do? He said, well, the only thing I have to suggest to you, have always a pad or a piece of paper ready and a pen and write it down. And then you look at it, at least you will see what you have to do. He said, thank you very much. They go home, they have their dinner. After dinner, he said to his wife, darling, do we have some ice cream? She said, sure. He said, and do we have some nuts? She said, sure. Do we have a banana? She said, yes. He said, do me a favor. Take some ice cream, slice the banana, and then put some sprinkles of the chocolate on it. She said, sure. She said, write it down, darling. She said, no. He said, and darling, before she goes in the kitchen, on top of it, if we have a maraschino cherry, put it on. It reminds me when I was young, there was a banana split. Anybody remembers the banana split? Anyhow, she said, sure. And before he can say, write it down, she vanishes. She comes back 10 minutes later with a plate of scrambled eggs. He said, darling, I told you to write it down. You forgot the bacon. So don't feel sorry if you forget things. Anyhow, so that takes care of memory. I remember it well. Well, did anyone see the Irish Cabaret?
Yes.
How many of you? Okay, the rest didn't, then I tell you my story. Would you like to hear another story? Yes. Okay. This year, as you know, the film came out, the advanced style, and they publicized it. They took an agent, and the agent made arrangements for me and 5 or 6 of the other ladies in the book and in the film to make an appearance. And we were sitting there in a place called the Winery in New York, which had a stage, and it had a bar and lots of tables around, where you could have dinner or whatever. And he sort of asked questions, and each one of us ladies gave the answer which we felt, whatever we felt. And then he asked, what do you think about, what is that word? Reconstruction. I said, reconstruction? Am I a bricklayer? What the hell? Then suddenly it dawned on me, it's a new, modern, elegant word for facelift. So I said, well, what am I going to tell them? What advice do you give to young people? I said, first of all, they're pretty, they're young, they don't need to lift their face because it's already lifted. It doesn't need anything. Number 2, I want to tell you a story. That will explain a lot to you. There was a lady in her 30s, and she felt she wants so much to have something done, but she doesn't want to do it without being sure that she has some time. So she goes over house of the Lord, and she prays and she prays, and she said, dear Lord, please, please give me a sign, any sign at all. Will I have still 25 years to live? At least. Smoke comes out of the candle, and a deep voice said, yes. She can't wait to get home. She gets home, she makes telephone call, she calls eye doctor, she calls the lip thing, whatever, your belly, your behind, your boobs, everything. She makes an appointment, she checks herself into a hospital, and she has one operation after another, and she looks absolutely beautiful when she comes out. She looks in the mirror, her dream is fulfilled. She comes out of the hospital full of pride and joy. She walks across the street, a truck comes unexpectedly, boom, kills her. She comes into heaven, and she says, dear Lord, why did you do this to me? You promised me. Why? Please, just tell me why. Smoke comes out of the clouds. More smoke comes out of the clouds. And a voice comes, because I didn't recognize you. So you see, whenever I feel low, and that is something I will share with you, whenever I feel low and in the dumps, and there are many times, and even I, who is very up, there are times when you feel very burdened, when you feel, my God, I walk so slowly, how much slower can I walk? What will happen when I can't? So when you have these thoughts, in order to pull myself out, I tell myself a funny story. I tell myself something which cheers me up, something which lifts my spirit. And you know, when I walk my 3 flights of stairs in New York, I have a place in a small house, 3 flights, and I have to go up and down. I do it at least once, and I say, oh, it's an exercise. Do it very, very carefully and slowly. But you know what I do? When I feel, my God, all these stairs, I think to myself, when I'm going up the stairs, when I come from the street, I say, da 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 dum da dee da 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 from Carmen, you know the thing, off Toreador, because then I feel uplifted. The Toreador song does it. When I go down and it's very heavy, then I think to myself, and I have to laugh about it, Volga Schiff. You know, when the Russians had a big rope with a big boat, and they pull the boat, la da dum da da dee da dum ba ba. But at least I can laugh about it. It makes it a little nicer, you know. So this is my advice to all of you. If you have a heavy burden, think of something which amuses you. It lightens it up. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.